everyone. Welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you here today. I hope you're able to see what I put in the chat. I'm going to put it in again for the folks who just arrived. But as we're going over some of the logistics of what this event is going to be like today, we'd love to know in the chat. Please share with us right now, what is sparking joy in your life? What are you celebrating? What are some of your recent wins? Share with the community that we're building here today. So as you're typing and sharing, I'll start by introducing myself. Hi, hello, I'm Ethan Costin. I use they, he pronouns, and I'm a professor of gender, sexuality, and women's studies at Virginia Commonwealth University and co-lead of the Sexploration Project, a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation pioneering ideas grant to build a culture of sexual health in the US. For visual description, I'm a white person with short, sort of cropped light brown hair, and today I'm wearing small round metal glasses and a button-down shirt with vertical blue, purple, teal, and beige stripes. From time to time, as I'm known to do, I'll talk with my hands, and you might also be able to see my black and gray tattooed arm sleeves. A few items to note. The first is that closed captioning is available. You can view it by clicking on the CC icon and selecting View Subtitle. And although this is a webinar format, so we won't be able to see your smiling faces today, we encourage you to engage in the chat with us. Right now, we'll go ahead and turn the chat back on at the very end. And while our panelists are discussing today, the Q&A feature will be available for you. We'll be monitoring it and looking at it, answering your questions, and also thinking about those questions for the Q&A portion at the end. To that end, I'll remind you that as we're introducing this panel and each other, the chat is open. We want to know what sparks joy in your life right now. What are you celebrating? One thing sparking joy in me is the musical stylings of Shay Diamond's American Pie, the song playing when you arrived, and a song discussed by one of our panelists, Spark Magazine's special issue piece on Sissy Sonics. In David B. Green's own words, quote, "A unique style of Black music that speaks to the beauty, power, and fierceness of Black, queer, and trans folks, especially those who identify as femme or effeminate or femme effeminate. Sissy Sonics contends that Black, queer, and trans folks are love, light, and enough, period." As you all may be already feeling and experiencing, we want this event to be both interactive and full of joy. I can already see here in the chat that some of you are really enjoying this spring warm weather. I'm also enjoying the sunny warm weather where I am today. Plants are blooming, trees are budding. Some of you have heard the birds chirping. I'm also seeing some gender affirmation happening. Congratulations for folks who have had surgeries, who are recovering and feeling good. Spending time with family, about to publish a book series. These are all really amazing glimmers that you've shared with us. And hopefully we can do something sort of creatively, anonymously, but creatively, where we'll share out after this event some of these glimmers in this community that we're making for this brief moment in time. But before I get too far into what this event is all about, I want to invite the rest of our panelists and moderators to go ahead and join me on camera. Welcome, esteemed colleagues, comrades, and friends. Today, we are collectively joining you from many places across Turtle Island, from the stolen ancestral and modern day lands of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples to the densely inhabited land of the 31 tribes of the Powhatan Nation, in which I'm currently a settler, and the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fire Confederacy of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, as well as the Wyandot Nation, in which the University of Michigan is situated. Today's event is a special one. This is the first of hopefully many fruitful virtual events put on by the Spark team. Spark is the online magazine of the National Center for Institutional Diversity, published by the University of Michigan. I myself am a member of the magazine's editorial board, and early on in my engagement with the Spark team, I had this idea for a special issue focused on shifting the usual deficit, disease, and disordered framework that so often accompanies our conversations about us LGBTQIA people and lives. I want more work on flourishing, pleasure, joy, fun, sex, the good kind. The Sexploration Project team and I worked to plan this event specifically during LGBTQIA+ Health Awareness Week, which is this week. and close to next Friday's Transgender Day of Visibility. While it may be uncommon to have so many faces for a panel event, we actually envision, and we hope you'll do a little bit of scene setting on your own with us, that this is a fireside chat among friends, a casual conversation before a Sunday tea dance, some dear friends gathering to share their stories after a long time apart. Maybe you want to dim your lights or light your favorite candle. Perhaps you want to warm up your cup of coffee or make some tea. In general, we hope this event will spark something in you, some curiosity to start new conversations with those around you about how to better support and resource to us LGBTQIA+ people during this truly very scary and violent moment in history. And maybe, just maybe, you'll leave with a deeper desire to work with us to chart a path toward a new, flourishing future for all. And so with that, I'll stop talking and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Natalie Malone, who's going to kick us and the panelists off.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Natalie Malone, she, her, and I am a Black queer woman scholar, hot girl scientist, and yoga teacher located in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm a doctoral candidate in counseling psychology at the University of Kentucky. And something that's sparking joy in me is that this weekend I get to spend time with some loved ones and I get to see Ari Lennox in concert. I love Ari Lennox. So my girl about to sing and I'm about to be singing with her. For a visual depiction, I'm currently wearing brown glasses and evil eye earrings that were handcrafted and beaded in silver. I have light green hair that's currently cut in a fade. I have on a black camisole type top and a red sweater. You can see some of my tattoo sleeve peeking out a bit. And as I talk with my hands today, you'll see some nails that are in talons, as well as some gem bracelets. So things like tourmaline and aquamarine for my day. I'm so excited to be in community with you today and wanted to invite you to join me in an embodied practice just to center ourselves and prepare for an invigorating discussion on 2S LGBTQIA+ flourishing. So for this activity and for my panelists, if you'd like to keep your camera on, you're more than welcome, or if you'd like to turn it off for your centering practice, feel free, and then turn it right back on when you're ready. We'll take some time to find a comfortable seated position. You can gently allow your eyes to soften or your eyes to close. Maybe you move around a bit in your body to find some movement, really ground down into the earth and into the source. Noticing the breath and how it's moving through the body, how it rises and falls. Perhaps you lengthen your inhale, hold at the top, and then exhale, hold at the bottom. Inviting in great joy, inviting in the energy of flourishing and what it means for you, what it means for your loved ones, for your community, for your collective. On each exhale, releasing tension, releasing oppression, releasing anything that makes you feel you are not desiring and worthy. Knowing that you arrived here in whatever way worthy, knowing that the person you are becoming is worthy, knowing that the person who you are, no matter how much this world tries to with you and say you're not that person's worthy. Really grounding into the feet, opening through the heart, accepting all the love, the ease, all the wonder and curiosity, playfulness and pleasure you desire. And then letting your next breath be the deepest breath of your day. Slowly beginning to invite in movement as you see fit. Wiggling the toes, maybe some circles with your wrist. Allowing your neck to fall from side to side. And then when you're ready, joining us back in the space, fully present and ready to go. I hope there were some nuggets in there, some gems you can take with you over the next hour, but also through the rest of your day. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I appreciate the love in the chat, y'all. Insert hearts. All right, so We are so excited to meet you, panelists. We're so excited to sit at your feet and just learn more beyond your contributions to the latest edition of Spark and our special edition. And we're going to get started with not only introductions, but an introductory question. So the question is, what is one defining moment in your life that stands out to you when you realized your current work is what you wanted to do? And I'm going to drop that in the chat. I'm also happy to repeat it if needed. I know there are so many critical moments we can think of. And I'll actually get us started to give you a little bit of time to think. So for me, I study Black women's spiritual, sexual, and holistic wellness. And I think a critical moment in my life that put me towards this work was actually when I was younger. And I did like this, I guess you could call it like a library/literary boot camp. And I was the only Black girl there. And I got caught with a sex book in the library. And everybody made the biggest deal out of it. I was so embarrassed, but I've always been like a straight shooter. I've always said what I had to say. And I was just like, I needed to learn what this was about. And I don't see what the problem was. So I just like basically let this librarian have it. And I feel like it was my one little moment stepping into my voice and just knowing that there was something in that work that was important for me to know and something important for my body and being to know. And that's always stuck with me. I kind of went away from this for a while. And then of course, as I came into my queerness, my Black womanness, all of it came resurfacing back. And I was like, dang, that was the seeds being planted when I was about 7 or 8 years old. So I think that's going to be my critical moment in this season. And I'd invite whoever from the panel would like to go next to jump in.
I can go next to kick us off. Greetings, everyone. I'm Michelle Vaughn. I use she and her. I'm an associate professor here at Wright State University. I think about the critical moment I was reflecting on was actually my dissertation, which is a source of very strong emotions for almost anyone who's done one. That is when my work, I became a scholar in my mind, and I chose to integrate positive psychology into my early work on queer experience, and particularly on disclosure. And there wasn't a lot of folks explicitly doing that, at least with the label of positive psych in the terms. And the amazing gift that was for myself in my journey and so many other folks that I got to develop and highlight and create a tool for people measuring personal experiences of growth tied to coming out that exists in the world. And that has pretty much influenced all of my career on positive psych and the experience of marginalized people, especially around sexuality and gender. So that's what I'm sitting with and connecting to. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, I imagine. So thank you all for your time. I am a white woman wearing a light green top, purple short hair, and little dangly earrings that are, I think they're tulips for description. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And yes, I love your earrings, definitely giving spring. Who would like to jump in next?
I can pop in. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean. So I am currently in Maine right now. For description, I am a white man with short brown hair and a red beard, wearing a light blue button-down shirt. I would say one kind of defining moment that was actually somewhat recent, I think, would be also kind of my dissertation and also this exhibition that I was working on at the University of Michigan. They were both happening at the same time, and they were both happening during the pandemic. But they were sort of both about the intersections of gender, sexuality, and power, and kind of institutions of power. So my dissertation was on military imagery from 19th century France and Britain, and sort of how, and depictions of soldiers and how kind of depictions of suffering and sacrifice were used to sort of cover over imperial and military aggression. So that was, what I was working on one hand, and then this exhibition called Oh Honey, which was about sort of the process of queering the institution of the University of Michigan Museum of Art and sort of looking at the collection through a queer lens, which became spraying out of my desire to try to excavate kind of quote unquote queer artists from the collection that then ran into all these kind of different problems that I can, go into later. But it was just that process, which was about, a 3-year-long project happening alongside this dissertation, and the two really kind of informed one another. And that is, those ideas are things I'm still trying to carry on into my work after finishing the PhD.
Sean, you're getting so much love in the chat. People love the exhibit. Just wanted to highlight that and give you some flowers. Thanks so much for sharing.
I have my hand raised because I'm used to the hand raise function. Sorry. I was like, is she gonna call me? Okay. So hi everyone. David Green, Cal State LA. For visual purposes, I'm wearing a blue shirt. I have very dark skin. I'm African American. I don't think there was one defining moment in graduate school. I think my moment came, I should let everyone know that I'm a child of trauma, right? So my mom left me, I grew up in poverty. I'm a first generation college student, and along that journey, my defining contours was shaped by lovelessness. So I always asked myself, where is love? How can I experience love? And I began my academic research as a McNair scholar. And from there, I started asking questions where I was trying to find me in discourses of intellectual possibility. So all of that from undergrad to graduate school led me to thinking about Black queer people, because ultimately I thought the world hated a Black queer man, including my family. So that's how I began. I'm still researching and I'm still finding myself. I am by no way complete by having a PhD. And I constantly write to remember what love feels like. And so my piece, Sissy Sonics, was centering me and music and my joy of music to really think about don't ever lose this feeling. So so my moments were across a spectrum of time, and it led me to really try to find what is love and what does it feel like? And in music, what does it sound like? So that's what I want to say here. I'm going to lower my perpetually raised hand, and that's all I'll say.
First of all, totally didn't see the hand. I'm sorry. Second of all, don't make me that emotional because that's beautiful. And I deeply appreciate you sharing that. It really reminded me of something. I have a Black queer writer friend who recently said she felt her writing was heart work. And your statement reminded me of that because there's so much love and liberation in the work that we do, and we can find that and gift it back to ourselves in beautiful ways. I definitely felt that way when I read Sissy Sonics. So thank you for sharing that with the world. Who would like to go next? Feel free to jump in.
I can jump in. I'm Catherine Schaefer. I am a research assistant at the National Center for Gender Spectrum Health, and I am a graduate student at the Family and Social Sciences program at the University of Minnesota. And for visual purposes, I am a white genderqueer person wearing a pink top with long brown hair and a Black headset on. And my article is about kink and positive sexuality. So my moment was a little bit more personal, and it was very much one moment where I set myself on fire accidentally. What happened was I was in a scene and I had a candle and I had done my hair up. So I had all this hairspray and I was going through my initial discussion in the scene, the whole consent part. And suddenly I felt warmth on my face and I realized that my hair had gone up, and I'm a very anxious person. And so I just pretended like it didn't happen and just put it out with my hand. And I thought, I am losing all credibility in this scene. This person is going to see that I don't know what I'm doing. This is going to be terrible. And then afterwards, when we were sort of debriefing, my partner said to me, you know, when you just reached up and you put that fire out with your hand, that was terrifying and exciting all in once. It was just wonderful. And I thought, you know, I was more empowered in this moment than I realized. I realized that I had taken all of my own baggage to this scene about whether I was good enough, whether or not I had planned correctly, all of these things that I was thinking about myself. And this person was just there for the humanness of it. This person was there to just sort of say, like, that was really funny and kind of great as well. So it made me think about all the ways that I internalized fear and shame in sex and how that's really just a matter of perspective taking. And it made me think about the preconceptions I have, the baggage about roles, and how if I look at it from a different angle, it was actually much more empowering than I thought that it would be. So that sort of spurred on taking a strengths-based perspective for kink and positive sexuality research.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty badass to just like take your hand and like snatch fire. Not gonna lie. So I think that is a dope reframe. So love
Thank
it. Others, and for my fellow Sexploration team members, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Andres, you're muted.
Ah, the Zoom world.
Thank you for that. Greetings, everyone. My name is Andres. I am co-lead for the Sexploration Project. I'm also working on my PhD in human sexuality from the California Institute of Integral Studies. And in the Sexploration Project, I am a postdoctoral fellow at Virginia Commonwealth University. Aside from that, I consider myself a pleasure activist. And for me, the initial experience of being in a somatic touch space and recognizing, I think, the wisdom that I had in my body. This was at like 37 years of age. And so I was attending a weekend workshop from an organization called the Body Electric School. And I was completely blown away with the power that exists in touch and in consent and in breath work and in movement and so many other things. And that was the point in time where I realized that maybe I could make use of the knowledge that existed below my neck in my life. So that was my transformative moment. In terms of my who I am or what I look like right now, I am Latino, Mexican American. I prefer the term Chicano, although I was not born and raised in California. I am bald, wearing red glasses and a red polo shirt. And I'm coming to you from San Antonio, Texas, from my little office and creative library. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You have some sacred intimacy shout outs in the comments.
Hi, everyone. I'll go next. My name is Shannon Snap, she, her, and I'm an associate professor in psychology at California State University, Monterey Bay. And I am, just a little extra background, bisexual cisgender woman. I'm also a mother of two. So I have a almost 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And this is my first time away from them, actually. So I'm in a conference right now in Utah, hence the very beige background of my hotel room. And I didn't mean to have my shirt also match the beige background of my hotel room. I live in San Francisco and I commute to Monterey. I teach a class on love, which is probably one of the most joyful experiences I have had in my life. And my work focuses on understanding how relationships and systems can support queer young people. And for this project, I focused on looking at LGBTQ young adult hookup experiences. I would say a defining moment for me started, it was a little bit personal and professional, but I was in graduate school at Boston College, just beginning to study hooking up. And I noticed that most of the literature was focusing on straight young adults. And so I started digging into the research on LGBTQ young adults and youth. And that brought me to the research of Dr. Stephen Russell, who at the time was at the University of Arizona. And after I started reading his work, I really couldn't put it down. And I basically stalked him until he gave me a postdoc after I finished my PhD. And I just saw him this morning at this conference. So it's just sort of full circle moment for me. And then we started doing some of the work with another one of his students on queer hookups, amongst other things. And also at the time, when I was in grad school, feels more of a personal disclosure. I was married to a man and I had my first crush on a woman, which was quite a shocking experience at like 28 years old. And so I came in to read about sexual fluidity. And so it was sort of a combination of professional interests and personal awareness, sexual identity development, all coming together at once. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. And I'm going to have to hear more about a class on love, especially if it's at a university, because I've never seen that. This is my first time hearing about it. So I can't wait to learn more. Last and certainly not least, we have Deandra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Deandra. A little intro. I'm a fourth-year undergrad at UCLA, and I'm which sits on the Gabrielino Tongva, but currently I'm in my home in San Diego because I'm on spring break. But a visual description: I'm a Chicana Latina woman with long dark brown hair, wearing pink rimmed glasses and a kind of like black, gray, and white sweater that says newspaper on it. And I can't really think of one defining moment, which is kind of funny because I feel like I'm young, so I feel like I should be able to like find it because it's like I don't really have a lot of experience or whatever. But I think for me, one thing that I will say that makes me feel that this work is for me is that whenever I'm in these spaces, so like even with my work with this exploration project or even being here on this webinar, I always get this like my heart kind of swells with like just like the positive energy and the loving energy and just like all the information that is shared. And so whenever I'm in those spaces, like whether they be physical or just like in like mental spaces, and I get that like swelling of my heart, I know that like this is the work that's meant for me. So yeah, so I'm just really grateful to be here and excited to hear what you all have to say. So thank you.
And to further toot Deandra's horn, she is the project's director of public engagement and is currently producing our podcast. So we're available on pretty much every major streaming platform. So you should definitely check out that podcast for the great work that she's doing in that realm. Thank you, everyone, for storytelling a little bit about where you've been and some of these defining moments. I want to pivot us to the sort of main context of this panel today, which is flourishing. So those of us who work in the mental health realm, myself included, know that there's a shift from resilience, I would say, as a concept to some other concepts, some words we might call thriving, flourishing, holistic well-being, because we realize that resilience as a concept is pretty simplistic. I mean, if you've survived something, you're resilient. If you're still here, if you're here with us today, you're resilient. We're all resilient. There are a lot of things we're surviving these days, every day, all of us. So yeah, we're resilient. But I'm more interested in how we move from a place of making it work to actually feeling like we're having our social, emotional, psychological, physical, sexual well-being needs met. So with this in mind, I'd love to ask our panelists to explore either how your work itself speaks to this issue of flourishing and thriving, the potential for harnessing our strengths in pursuit of flourishing and thriving, or alternatively, how you personally care for each other within your communities and how your communities nourish you and support you to flourish in return.
I can jump in and kick us off just to get the ball rolling. So my work which is part of the, the original written piece and ongoing, is really about flourishing, thriving, those kind of experiences within consensual non-monogamy, which is by and large centered on queer folks disproportionately. And so that work, which is also my lived experience, really centers on freedom, autonomy, flexibility that people find in considering and exploring non-monogamous relationships. So this idea of being able to express parts of yourself, often that's sexuality, with different partners, might be also freedom from, for aspectrum folks, kinky folks, this idea of when you do your relationships differently, it creates more space to question the norms and the standards that come with monogamy, come with cisnormativity, heteronormativity, that people often report, joy, freedom, sexual pleasure, being able to be more authentic. And those are the pieces I'm always excited about when we talk about strengths and growth, is about authenticity and joy and being able to express important parts of self. I imagine that might connect to other people's work as well.
I think that joy in expressing different parts of yourself is a really important part of my work too. That's definitely something I think about. There's a book called The Color of Kink by Ariane Cruz, where she discusses how kink can help people engage in a process of queer world making. And so much of the research on kink has been historically pathologized the practice. And it's very similar to how queer sex has been pathologized. So I like to take a strengths-based approach and ask how our practices benefit us and how they can be an asset toward positive development. How can we rewrite some of the trauma we've experienced and turn it into a positive identity building and person building experience? It's also described by Richard Sprott as a leisure activity, and it's accessible to a wide variety of people. It can create a supportive community for people who are otherwise feeling isolated. And I think of all these features combined with the agency that comes with the ability to negotiate a scene, I think they contribute to a spirit of playfulness and flourishing within the practitioners of kink.
I'll go. I just put the book up because I love the cover of The Color of Kink. It is so powerful. It's one of my favorite covers to look at. I like to dance. I like to listen to music, and I like to really engage with my body, because my body over the years of my life have been so shamed by people, whether it's because I'm dark skinned or because I quote unquote walk with a deep swish. I've always tried to really control my body in public spaces, but dancing allows me to not care and really just enjoy myself. So music allows me to do that. One of my favorite groups growing up was TLC, and I would imagine that I would be in a TLC concert doing the creep with him, And over the years, I really like how queer, Black queer, brown queer artists are just on stage dancing with such freedom. And it just reminds me of this is how we can flourish and not give a damn about what people say, but, model for how you can be free. So I listen to music, I dance, I run. And in fact, one of the things that's given me joy today is that when I leave here today, my students in my LGBT culture production class have to engage in walking. So they're watching Pose, and they created a house and they created categories. And today in class, they're going to walk their categories in class, and that is a bodily expression. And they are totally nervous, but they're totally into it. So that's why I listen to what I do, because I do believe that we can express and model joy with our bodies, even just with dance and movement. So that's what flourishing means to me.
I can jump in. So I think that, so None of my positions in museums so far have really been specifically about LGBTQ issues or advocacy per se. They've been kind of more broader, like a curatorial fellowship, or now my position is about faculty outreach and college learning. So bringing students and classes into the museum. So I am thinking about how to make the museum space itself as sort of as welcoming to people in that stage of life as possible. And often museums, through their architecture, through even, the way that they are framed, they can be sort of austere, almost off-putting institutions. And so I'm, working with my colleagues to think about how, in simple ways, really, to even make the space more welcoming by just, even having more and more comfortable seating or increasing accessibility. Colleagues of mine have been working with students to have community response opportunities inside the museum. So that's one way through this new role at the Oberlin College Museum of Art. I've been trying to kind of foster a sense, at least, of inclusivity and welcome to anyone really who comes through those doors. But on the other hand, my kind of idea of studying the history of museums and their kind of ties to nationalism and colonialism, there's this also need to grapple with those sort of long histories of violence as well. So it's kind of this, this sort of balance of those two ideas. And then in the exhibition projects that I'm working on, so again, to date, my scholarship has been on kind of imagery of violence, which seems like the opposite of joy and thriving. But now I am interested looking at artists who actually sort of emphasize things like personhood and dignity, even joy in the face of violence and trauma in situations like the long-standing wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, for instance, and artists who respond to those conflicts not through the spectacularization of death and violence, but rather emphasizing kind of humanity and dignity and things like that. So those are just a few instances where I'm trying to sort of, in a way, sort of gear shift from my sort of normal to date interest or study of violence and nationalism, and trying to think about how to sort of flip those narratives.
I'll share a little bit about our work on LGBTQ hookups. One of the ways that we tried to change the narrative in the research on queer sexuality was to not look at it from a deficit perspective or from a risk-focused lens, which a lot of the research on young adult sexuality, youth sexuality had already been doing, and particularly with queer sexuality. So when we designed a study to look at young adults, LGBTQ plus young adult hookup relationships and how those came about, we actually found, and not to my surprise really, because I already anticipated there were a lot of untold stories, but some of the things that I think focus on flourishing and thriving center around what motivates queer young people to hook up. And one of the things that they told us in our interviews with them is that they're motivated to hook up not just to fulfill their own sexual pleasure, which was common in the literature, regardless of sexuality. But one of the things queer young people said that I hadn't heard in the research on straight young adults was that they were also highly motivated to pleasure their partners. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I just love that they were talking about that it wasn't this sort of selfishly driven thing, not that they weren't, again, also interested in their own pleasure, but that their partner's pleasure also really mattered to them. And we also have another paper that looked at how queer young adults use hooking up as a means to validate and explore their sexual identity. And so again, we were trying to focus on seeing it as a normal developmental process and not problematizing hookup culture, but seeing that queer young people were actually going into it with this mindset of self-discovery and validation of who they are. And we're being really thoughtful about their choices in a way that, again, wasn't highlighted in the literature previously. And then the last thing we focused on was, well, not really the last, but one of the papers that's about to be published, focused on how queer young adults are actually very thoughtful about the way that they consider their personal safety when navigating hookup culture, from the very beginning phases of, how they might try to develop a relationship online with someone, to just talking with someone, chatting, texting, and so on, to actually meeting up, and that there's various levels of safety precautions that queer young people take around their personal and physical safety. And again, we just tried to highlight some of these uncommonly heard narratives around queer young adult sexuality in the realm of hooking up that we hadn't heard previously. And from all of that, I can say that we have a lot of lessons to learn from queer young people. They're doing amazing. And I'm so impressed with the thoughtfulness that people are taking around how they explore their sexuality, how they consider and, are very thoughtful about the bodies of other people. So thanks for listening.
Thank you all so much for your responses. This is Deandra again. So diving into the next question. So as we are likely all aware, the current moment we find ourselves in is a particularly unsettling one. Trans and queer people and bodies are under attack in so many ways, such as the bill that passed in the Tennessee House, which, if enacted, would allow officials to deny marriage license to same-sex, gender, and interracial couples, as well as the legislation banning drag shows, artists from public spaces in a number of conservative states. So all these and more considered, what political movement or piece of legislation do you believe the public needs to know more about at this moment? And please feel free to discuss anything that might not seem particularly related to the LGBTQIA+ community, but could be related to something else, but have ripple effects for our community.
I was actually thinking of one recently that actually seems like it has nothing to do with our subject at hand, but about student debt relief, which selfishly is just on my mind, with student loans becoming due soon. But just seeing the challenges to student debt relief and the arguments against it, which seem, and I am in no way, shape, or form an expert on anything to do with the American legal system, but these seem completely unfounded. And the, sort of arguments against student debt relief seem completely made up. But why I see it as having a ripple effect, because as it's being considered by the Supreme Court now, there's just sort of no way of telling if the Supreme Court will make a decision that benefits people at all. And that's a very scary sort of situation to be in after we've seen the reversal of Roe v. Wade, and that other decisions might also be on the table for the Supreme Court. So I think just how the Supreme Court handles this issue seems like very dicey at the moment, and like it will have, other effects on other decisions.
As folks think, I want to chime in. There are a number of organizations I feel like I would love to see platformed in this moment, who I think are focusing a lot on queer and trans joy and so, sort of asset-based or strengths-based approaches, whether it's Interact, which is the sort of national intersex advocacy organization here in the US, or the Trans Latina Coalition that does a lot of really great work. There are numerous sort of Black-led trans femme-led organizations in the South that are working on issues that are not just about sort of drag ban laws, but are like, let's resource people, let's get folks into houses, let's feed community members. So I think that, you know, as folks are thinking about things, one place I'm always looking is community, right? Like who supports us, we support us.
I think about that kind of support, and I'm in Minnesota right now, and the climate has been obviously very difficult on all of us. It's hard to remain positive right now, but I think we're all tired from constantly fighting. And one piece of legislation I'd like to highlight is Minnesota Bill 146. It's known as the Trans Refuge Bill, and it establishes Minnesota as a trans refuge state. And that means that out-of-state laws can't interfere in the practice of gender-affirming healthcare here. And it's an example for me of not just reacting to punitive legislation, but actively putting in place protections for trans and gender diverse people in our state. And I believe that the public needs to know about this because it's an example of the kinds of proactive protection that we need to enact. And hateful legislation is not just aimed at restricting trans people, but it's also developed to exhaust us. And knowing about laws like this and about concrete actions we can take to protect ourselves, I think that not only gives us a sense of hope, but more of a roadmap to positive and protective steps we can take against hateful legislation. It was Bill 146. I think it's HF 146.
And I think we have time for one more person to go here before we open it up to Q&A. And I just want to say out loud for those who aren't following along in the chat, we have a Q&A function for the Zoom and we're looking at it and watching it. It's the best place to put any questions that you might have for folks for us to use up the last little remaining bit of time.
I guess I'll share a quick thought, which is also to shout out Arthur Lipkin, who is one of the participants on this panel, but he could have been on this panel. He's in the audience, which is to continue to advocate for LGBTQ inclusive curriculum, you know, critical race theory, all the various types of curriculum that are in school and that people are continuing to try to get out of schools to erase the real lives and histories of the students of, you know, past and present. And a lot of our work has shown the benefit of queer inclusive curriculum in schools and what it does for queer young people. And some of that has been, you know, formalized through legislation that says, yes, we must teach this. I know, for example, in the state of California, we have that, but backing that up with actual money and support for teachers and educators. And so just to remain vigilant about everything that's happening around curriculum in this country and the ways that we really need to support young people in schools.
All right, well, thank you all so much. We can go ahead and move on to the Q&A now.
So I'm going to jump in here. This is Andres again. The last question that we are going to ask, we would like you to include in the chat. And what we're doing essentially is we're going to collect all of your responses so that we can produce a handout for it. The question basically is, what is the one thing that you specifically will do, or anyone in the audience could do, to take care of yourself and look out for each other. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can be something really simple. But it's meant to sort of, we want to generate ideas and thoughts about just easy ways to be able to do that. So, and I'll pass it over to Ethan, I think, who will be is fielding questions.
Sure. So we have a little bit of time left. I'll just sort of shout out some of the questions I'm seeing here. Any of the panelists who want to unmute to contribute. What's the last good film, TV show, music, etc. that you're digging right now? Something fun that brings you joy.
I can jump in because it feels like a big deal in my baby queerness. I just finished the original L Word and I'm currently on Generation Q. I'm in season 2. I'm gonna binge some more tonight until I fall asleep. And it's great.
I am a horror fan. Oh, sorry. Someone else. All right, I'll just keep going. I'll be quick. The Last of Us, episode 3 with Nick Offerman gave me so much queer joy, and it was just such a sweet piece of TV, and it just was like such a really great depiction of queer love, I thought. So I really enjoyed that episode.
I am rewatching the kind of reimagined She's Gotta Have It, which is all written and directed by, I believe, all Black queer women, if you're aware of that from the 80s, and how much it helped me understand and think about Black non-monogamous experiences from women. So if anyone has other feelings about it, of course, but yeah, it really resonates.
Others?
I'm not watching anything, but I am reading a lot, and I'm currently reading young adult queer BIPOC-centered novels, and I'm currently reading Epic Love Story, and it's about 2 young queer boys of color in high school falling in love with each other. But it's also a novel where it makes it normal, or it norms this idea that deaf people and people with different disabilities can fall in love. It's so beautiful. And the other centering is the fluidity of one of the characters. It's like, I like boys, I like girls, I like everyone. And it's giving young folks something to think about in terms of how they can be in touch with their sexuality, how they can fall in love and out of love and be messy. So I'm reading that, and Case and Calendar and I'm reading through all of Case and Calendar's novels, but I'm just on Epic Love Story right now. So that's it.
Amazing. We do have other questions. We're running fairly short on time. Some of those questions have been answered in the chat. For others that remain, we'll take note of it. And in the follow-up, when you get a recording of this video, maybe we can attempt to provide some resources for folks in those areas that might be helpful. I do, while I still have most of you here though, want to thank our panelists so much for joining us today and sharing all of their wonderful sort of stories and perspectives on life and their work. I want to thank the NCID event production team. It's been amazing working with you. I want to thank everyone here for engaging so actively with us and sharing your joy with us today. Please don't forget to complete the post-event survey at the end of this discussion, which will help us in following up with you and to spark plans events for the future. And then lastly, as a plug, the Sexploration Project is actually continuing these conversations all throughout the spring and summer. We'll have monthly roundtables, one in April, one in May, and one in June. The first one is April 26th. I put the flyer in the chat, and then I will one more time again share the link. It's free, it's virtual. We've got folks from the US, Canada, and the UK joining us, and we would love to see you there and continue this really necessary and vital conversation. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today.